In 2005, I threw a party and hoped someone would come. Turns out they did. And for the past 20 years, we've been telling the story of online travel in Asia. But this is the story we haven't told, the untold story. The one about late nights, wild ideas, and dreams coded into websites by people who didn't always know what they were doing, but knew why they were doing it. This is the story of revolution, of resilience, of reinvention. Welcome to Online Travel in Asia, the Untold Story.
But I never caught a glimpse.
In the last days of 1999, as the 20th century was drawing to a close, this song played over and over in my head. It was Changes by David Bowie. Big changes were coming travel's way, Asia's way, my way as a travel journalist. That same year, David Bowie was interviewed by BBC's Jeremy Paxman. He spoke about his music, how Ziggy Stardust came to life, and then, towards the end, he spoke about the internet.
Seeing the tip of the iceberg, I think the potential of what the internet is going to do to society, both good and bad, is unimaginable. I think we're actually on the cusp of something exhilarating and terrifying.
Thanks, Bowie. Already, we were being frightened to death by the Y2K doomsday scenario, the day when computers would crash, clocks would stop working, the world would grind to a halt. Would the beginning of the 21st century turn out to be a Rocky Horror Picture Show? But I clung to this slice of inspiration from the cult musical.
Don't dream it.
Don't dream it, be it. So as the calendar flipped to 2000 and the world didn't grind to a halt, I decided to be it. I liberated myself from the corporate world, I went freelance, I got a dog whom I named Dylan, cause the times, well, they are changing. Published a travel book around Asia in 1 hour in 2003, and in 2005 launched the WIT conference. We are at the beginning of something unimaginable and terrifying. It was time to do something unimaginable and terrifying. As it turned out, it's been the best 20 years of my life. Some moments are seared into memory. Where you were, who you were with, what you were drinking. For me, that moment was September 11th, 2001. I was in Jakarta at a hotel bar, decompressing after a long day at a travel trade show. Then everything stopped.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
The Twin Towers, the silence, the shock, the panic. This defining moment for the world also turned out to be the defining moment for online travel.
This event happened that had a dramatic impact on the world. At that time, a number of the particularly US airlines and hotel groups had gone in pretty deep with websites. They were pretty well invested. And what happened after 9/11 was that everybody in the US who had travel plans, they were all disrupted. All flights stopped. Nobody could move. If you wanted to get from A to B, you had to rent a car. The car rentals were flooded. But more importantly, the telephone lines just melted down. So if you were trying to call Delta or United or Marriott or Hilton or whatever, you were waiting for hours. And then people realized that with some of those carriers and some of those hotel groups, you could actually go on their website. And they went on their website and they found, oh, I can find my booking on here and I can actually change my booking or get a refund or whatever it was they wanted to do, make a new booking. They could do it on the web. And people like that a lot more than sitting on the phone talking to a customer service agent. So, 9/11 was an incredibly sad and negative event. But for the online travel industry, it was like a rocket booster.
It was also a defining moment for Expedia. In 2001, Barry Diller's IAC had bought Expedia, and the agreement had been signed and ready to go when September 11th happened.
They actually had the agreement signed and ready to go, ready to be executed when September 11th happened in 2001. And Barry Diller, now famously within Expedia, said because they were saying, we should walk away from this, Barry. This is, not the industry you want to be in right now. And he said, where there's life, there's travel. And that has guided us as a company for a long time. That's guided me because where there's life, there's travel. This industry is resilient.
The other thing that sticks into my mind, interestingly, once you get old and you watch things, is the turning points of tragedy in an industry. On reflection, we can look, for instance, to 9/11 and the attacks on America as a turning point in online travel. What happened, and I think it's well known during that time, travel was grounded across America and most of the Northern Hemisphere and other parts of the world as a result. There was a panic that the world had changed. It did. And that caused a ripple effect in accommodation. And the ripple effect in accommodation is a lot of hoteliers were seeking channels to expand, and they lent into the mobile channel. Now, I think that would have happened by itself anyway, but I think there's clear evidence that 9/11 accelerated the leaning in of hotels to the online channel, which accelerated online travel.
The age of online travel had begun. As the US market adapted, Asia was just beginning to stir. The internet's tendrils were reaching our shores. But online travel? Less than 6% of bookings in Asia Pacific were made online around 2003. And even in 2009, when Focusrite did a fuller market study, the share was just at 17.4% of a total travel market value of $240 billion. And yet, opportunity was everywhere. 5 billion people, rising middle class, fast mobile growth, ancient civilizations, modern ambitions.
These early days of online travel also coincided with the early days of mobile. And there was a type of technology lovingly referred to as WAP, which had a different meaning in 2000 to what I think it means culturally now. It had a meaning of a wireless application protocol. And it was the very early instances of mobile on feature phones. So how do you do the mobile internet on a phone that is just text-based? And it took the world by storm for about 6 months until everyone could see that it was completely unusable. And we had to wait another 7 years, 8 years until the birth of the iPhone before we truly got a shot at mobile. But those early days of mobile, I suppose those early days of mobile proved something for us in travel. That what can seem like overnight, i.e. mobile, can take 7 years to happen.
It's worth repeating. What can seem like overnight can take 7 years to happen. Well, some of the entrepreneurs here weren't going to wait either 7 or 20 years. The outsiders, the misfits, the believers. Not travel people, techies, financiers, ex-bankers. They were watching Expedia, watching Booking, watching the wave, and they weren't going to wait. In China, James Liang and friends launched Ctrip out of Shanghai in 1999. In India, Deep Kalra gave up on bowling alleys and rolled the dice on Make My Trip with 3 friends. It was, as Deep calls it, a trial by fire.
2000 to 2005 was trial by fire for us. It was really hard. We were focused on the non-resident Indian market, which was a small market. .com bust happened in 2001. VCs wanted their money back, did a distressed buyout, became management-held company, and somehow survived. I think there were a few years where we could have shut down any point of time. Most of the time, we didn't have more money than making 2 months of payroll and 2 months of rent. So those were crazy times, but I think those crazy and tough times really prepare you for the worst. More the heat and more the beating you take, the tougher you become. I think that's kind of our story. So we could withstand the rest better. 2005, I did feel that the India market is opening up, was ready for an online travel venture where people were ready not just to research online, but actually to book online, to drop their credit card online with the full assurance and comfort that this is a real thing. We galloped ahead till 2010 when we IPO'd.
The band of brothers were taking on China and India and blazing the trail. Japan, the land that inspired sci-fi author William Gibson's best-selling Neuromancer. He said, modern Tokyo was like some dystopian science fiction city come to life. It made Los Angeles look like Kansas. Kei Shibata, fresh out of business school, launched Travel.jp in 2001, ahead of Skyscanner 2003 and Kayak 2004. He had no broadband, no funds, no ownership, just a dream and dial-up.
So we launched a company, Venture Republic, in Tokyo back in January 2001. That was right after the dot-com boom had already crashed and burned completely. Needless to say, no investors in the market was showing the interest in us or any other internet companies. But luckily, we somehow managed to find the 2 investors who are willing to back us. And they value our company at the 0 premium. So it was an ultimate choice. So we want to take that money to start the company without ownership. Since me and my co-founders have just graduated from business school, we had basically no money, right? So we ended up with actually taking the cash. So we started the company with just 0.9% equity ownership. Yeah, so our early days were nothing but the challenges. But that's kind of what made it fun at the same time.
Meanwhile, a different kind of startup story was unfolding in China. At a Hong Kong airport cafe in 2005, 3 friends, Fritz Demopoulos, C.C. Chuang, and Douglas Koo, were figuring out what to do after selling their sports website. Google gave them the answer, literally. They had been torn between 4 categories: medical, financial, automotive, and travel. But Fritz Demopoulos recalled hearing Barney Harford, then Expedia Asia Pacific boss, say that Google was Expedia's largest competitor. Why would an OTA consider a search engine competition? So travel it was, and they launched China, China's first travel meta search. That decision changed their lives.
Chunar was a great startup adventure for my co-founders and my early employees and me. And we were in mainland China. This was 2005. We were building up to the Olympics. The consumer economy was taking off in mainland China. We had the right product too. Now, we didn't know we had the right product, to be honest. The success of Chunar exceeded our own expectations, and we had very ambitious expectations. But what we got to realize was sometimes the skills and capabilities that are required to succeed in China, they may not apply outside of China. And it came down to, do we have the skills and capabilities to actually execute this plan across multiple markets? Or should we just solely focus on mainland China, where, although I'm an American, most of my professional career has been in mainland China.
They weren't alone. In Singapore, a hotelier and a Yahoo guy walked into a bar. Craig Hewitt had the hospitality chops. Ross Veach had just left Yahoo and was ready to surf for the rest of his life. Ross offered Craig $50,000. Craig said, "Be my co-founder instead." Wego was born, but Southeast Asia wasn't ready.
I mean, in terms of Wego's journey, we started in 2005, and we're inspired by the metas getting set up in the US and in China, and we thought somebody should bring that to the rest of Asia. I saw all the low-cost carriers getting set up in the region, and there was no way to sort of shop them all at once, and it was kind of becoming annoying. So there's as much scratching an itch as pursuing a business opportunity when we decided to sort of focus on Southeast Asia initially. It took us a few years to realize that the market really wasn't ready for it. To make a meta model work, you need OTAs that know what they're doing, operating at scale. And that really wasn't the case in Southeast Asia at the time. And so we sort of had a choice. We could either become an OTA in our own right, or we could pivot and find a geography that was ready for our meta search marketplace business model. And, we took the latter path. So we pivoted to the Middle East after, I think, 4 or 5 years. And we realized the market was basically wide open. There was some really, really large suppliers who had their act together with e-commerce. But apart from Booking.com, there was nobody else really in the region. So we sort of walked into a largely vacant space and proceeded to connect everybody who was selling online.
It was the pivot that saved Wego. Customer acquisition costs were the same, but lifetime value was way higher. The Middle East was wide open, and Wego moved fast. Back in Thailand, 2 friends, Rob Rosenstein and Michael Kenny, were skipping metasearch altogether. They took an offline travel business online and named it Agoda. It was anything but fun, though, during the early days.
And there were just so many problems to sort out. And so many of companies were sort of jumping into the space. We thought, wow, this is going to be fun and exciting and interesting. Once you got into it, you realized, wow, there were so many problems we had to solve. Payments, mobile adoption wasn't there yet. And actually, when mobile adoption did explode, it was actually more of a problem than a great thing. Suddenly we needed multiple platforms and, it didn't really work well on a mobile screen. So it was just an endless set of miseries of trying to solve things that didn't work properly. And at the same time, sign up thousands of partners around the region, be able to speak, in digital language in so many different languages. And then we started to realize, we might have to localize, which is, again, another big problem to solve. So it was just a roller coaster where we were just working around the clock, solving one problem after the next. And that was just the character, the energy of the early days.
The energy was electric. In India, another metasearch emerged, 2007. 2 friends, Alok Bajpai and Rajneesh Kumar started Ixigo. At first, it copied the Western model of flights, until they had an aha moment and realized that the real goal was in buses and trains and solving for local customer problems. It proved to be the right path because 17 years later, in 2024, Ixigo had one of the most successful IPOs in India's travel tech scene. Asia had entered its heavy meta phase, a new era in online travel. In the words of Metallica, nothing else matters. Of course, back then, I didn't know what I know now. I didn't know there were all these crazy entrepreneurs out there doing crazy stuff. I thought SEO and SEM were related to the other three-letter words starting with S. I remember the first WIT, and oh, by the way, we were called Wired in travel then. Wired became Web when we got a legal letter, I think 3 years after launch. I took it as a form of flattery. One thing you learn, a defeat today can become victory tomorrow. I had had fears of what if I threw a party and no one came. But 140 people showed up from all over the region. Techies, founders, hoteliers. Some didn't know what they were doing there. Then the lights went out, literally, right in the middle of a keynote by Kwek Ling Beng. Can you imagine the owner of the hotel, the most powerful man in the Singapore business universe on stage, the biggest Asian hotel owner, and the lights go out? But nobody left, and the show went on. And that's when I knew we had something. The lure of Asia attracted pioneers from across the region, among them Gareth Williams, co-founder of Skyscanner, sensing, as it turned out correctly, that his company's future lies in Asia. WIT became the place for stories too strange for boardrooms and too true to ignore. Okay, enough reminiscing. Time to talk about bugs. In 2007, just 2 years after launch, Agoda got acquired by Priceline. Asia had its first real online travel exit, and suddenly, the world was paying attention. Was this the first turning point for online travel in Asia? Rob Rosenstein, co-founder of Agoda, has a different take on it.
Oh, God, no. Oh, God, no. No, not at all. That acquisition, was at a time where there was a much bigger thing going on, which was the global financial crisis. Because we were thinking, this is something I don't think I've ever talked about with anybody else, but I was thinking, why don't we roll up all these small companies into one big Asian player and see if we can sell it to one of the big American companies? I looked at all the other competitors in the space, and they were all sort of in that same boat. Like, maybe we should sell, maybe we should monetize, maybe we should, partner. And so there's a lot of activity on the deal space at the very early stages, because in those days, in Asia, many of us didn't think we had a chance to survive in the, shadow of these giant, what appeared in those days, it's sort of ironic, like these giant American players, Orbitz, Travelocity, Expedia, and maybe Priceline. And so it just shows you how fast things changed.
In India, things had taken off. In 2010, Make My Trip went public. Asia's travel tech wasn't on the sidelines anymore, it was on the scoreboard.
The hotel and package market took longer. So even at IPO time, we were still about 75, 78% actually flights and just about 22% hotel and accommodation and packages. But when they called up their travel agent and they said, hey, I want to book that rupees 999 fare from Delhi to Bombay, the travel agent very often didn't want to sell it. So the travel agent told the customer over the phone, oh, that's not available. Why don't you buy this? They wanted to sell full service carriers because they made more money there, but also because for booking a ticket on a low cost carrier, the travel agent went out of pocket. And if the customer changed their mind, then the travel agent was in a jam because you may not get the money from the customer, but you had to make it good to the airline. So I think online travel solved that in a beautiful way because we built on the APIs that the airlines had. We had real-time connectivity. So it was the customer who dropped their credit card when they liked something. Fundamentally, the paradigm changed from the travel agent being in control to the customer being in control. And that was a heady feeling. And I think that really got us off, I think, as a business model.
In 2011, and just 6 years after its founding, China sold to Baidu for $306 million. I still recall Fritz Demopoulos stepping out and taking the call when we were at WIT Australia in Sydney that year. He returned with a big grin on his face. It was time for the third Asian dragon to rise, Indonesia, population 277 million, fifth largest domestic travel market in the world. Enter Traveloka 2012. Started by 3 software engineers, Ferry Unadi, Albert, and Derianto Kusuma. They wanted to make travel easy for Indonesians. But it wasn't easy. They were ahead of their time. Digital infrastructure, not there. Industry, not ready. They were seen as a bunch of kids. Caesar Indra, now president, joined soon after and recalls the early days.
We started 13 years ago, and I joined shortly after. When we started, we had a simple question, right? How do we make travel more accessible? How do we make the world accessible to Indonesians? And it's such a simple question, but very hard to answer. Me personally, I was very excited, coming out of a small town, being able to work on a solution together with the group to solve real problem that's faced by average Indonesians and actually made real positive contribution to an imperfect place like Indonesia. The first problem that we had to solve was around payment. So we had to build a hardware to scale bank transfer because at the time, typical transaction was done via manual bank-to-bank transfer. So that's the first thing we solved. We built a hardware really to scale bank-to-bank transfer. The airline infrastructure also wasn't ready because majority of their booking was offline. It took a lot of my time to share this vision, to make them understand, to paint a picture of the future. If you don't invest in this, you won't be able to compete also with the rest of the players. So it's really about convincing and educating them that it's important to build the infrastructure for them. I think a lot of airlines view us as, just saw us as these new kids on the block that create nuisance for them. So for us, it's very hard to get through the door to get to the right decision makers and even get a meeting with the right person. So we really had to work very hard and take our time to be able to get that recognition.
And did you know? Traveloka actually started as a meta search.
Yeah, the reason we switched from Meta to Booking, I think there are a few reasons. The first one, when Indonesians book through us as a Meta, even though we directed to our partner, but they still call us
if there's problem with the ticket. So we are still serving. So we weren't really meta. The business model was a bit too early to start at the time. So there's this whole lot of backend infrastructures that wasn't ready to handle all this online travel demand, where we really had to play a role in really shaping one by one.
Turned out to be the best decision they ever made. Traveloka became a trailblazer in fundraising, and by 2017, it had achieved unicorn status, a valuation exceeding $1 billion. There was no looking back for this bunch of kids from small towns with big dreams to change travel. To Agoda's Rob Rosenstein, Traveloka represents the second wave of online travel that was largely shaped by capital flow from west to east, and it helped fuel the rise of local giants in China, India, and Indonesia.
As we came out of the global financial crisis, there was QE, quantitative easing. So the US government and Fed released so much capital into the markets, and so did other banks around the world, that it flooded the market with capital. And that financed a wave of homegrown, highly localized companies in APAC. The ebb and flow of the macro changed the character of the market, and that was a big turning point. That was largely a function of QE, of quantitative easing. The fact that capital is really one of the big disruptors in these industries. Not just, we tend to look at technology as the disruptor, but capital is a major disruptor. When I went to raise money in 2005-06, people were looking at me like, wait a minute, so you're not profitable and you're in Asia, and aren't all those Asian companies just going to be owned by Expedia and Priceline and Orbitz and Travelocity? Nobody wanted to put, real money into the business. Fast forward 8 years later, if you were in Indonesia, say we're going to be really big in Indonesia, suddenly you could raise 100 million. Right? Not, or billion, right? So I think the power, the notion that these big local markets is really a notion of the interest, the QE, interest in capital flowing into these big markets. And that's what made this work.
Whatever made it work, it seemed you could do no wrong in this second wave of online travel. Well-funded players such as Traveloka were chasing growth, not profitability. It was scale at all costs. The market was ripe for e-commerce and online travel. Low-cost airlines made air travel accessible to everyone and pushed travelers online with their best prices. A young population went social and mobile. It fired up the market and transformed it fundamentally from browsers to mobile. Then in 2016, Ctrip made two moves. In January, it invested in Make My Trip, a stake it increased 3 years later. The Chindia effect was coming into play. And in November 2016, it acquired Skyscanner in a deal which valued the Edinburgh-based company at about £1.4 billion. For the founders of Skyscanner, Gareth and his two co-founders, Barry Smith and Bonham Grimes, who had started the business to solve their personal problems of finding cheap flights to ski resorts, it was a beautiful exit. The pendulum had swung. Asia was untethering itself from Western models and going its own way. A new decade, 2020 and beyond, was coming. Remember 2009? Online travel share in APAC was at 17.4%. Well, in 2025, it stands at 65.4% of a total travel market value of $491 billion. The Asian century was getting into full swing until
we have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
March 2020, our first event of the year, with Indy, Penang. The day before, who declared the pandemic? Panic, uncertainty, confusion, fear. But we went on with the show, with caution, sanitizers, distancing. We didn't know then what we know now. We made it back to Singapore the night before borders closed. It was to be our last flight for nearly 2 years, our last physical event for at least 18 months. Travel collapsed, events collapsed. We were at the intersection of both. But we had our media and our community. Travel was hurting. We needed healing, hope, unity. We went into overdrive, organizing virtual events to bring people together and share stories of survival. I recall an interview with Ho Kwan Ping, chairman of Banyan Group, at the start of the pandemic. He said, "We are going to need 2 years of cash reserves." Everyone thought him extreme. Turned out, he was right. But we all became stronger, wiser.
Up until COVID, it was, it was a time where capital was more accessible. So our focus was really grow, right? So we wanted to grow at all costs, right? But COVID really changed how we operate as a company. So we scaled back on some of the businesses that are not really relevant. For example, food delivery. We also invested a lot in automation to create a better user experience, and at the same time reducing the cost of operations.
For many, it was a near-death experience.
COVID was a bit of a near-death experience for Uyghur. We, like a lot of travel companies, over the space of 2 weeks, we saw our revenues drop to almost nothing, and flatline for about 6 months, and then only very, very slowly come back. I had to go and talk to some of the family offices and sort of high net worth individuals in the Gulf that know us well, and we raised a quick round, which enabled us to keep the Uyghur team that we spent a decade assembling, keep it largely together. And rather than sort of decimating the team away, a lot of travel companies did during COVID and hibernate, we put together a pretty aggressive product roadmap, put our heads down, and sort of built stuff all the way through COVID. And when travel resumed, we were able to launch a bunch of new stuff, which is driving a lot of the very high levels of growth we're seeing at the moment.
For others, it was a time for a reset, a rethink.
COVID, of course, came and we had to rethink what we're about. And I had to think about why am I doing this in the first place? And what is it that I'm excited about? And it's this whole thing about, entrepreneurship and I would say to some degree, developing people, developing things that weren't there before. So, we had bought a couple of companies, we invested in a couple of companies, and we thought maybe we should just do more of that. And so that's, I think, where we are today as a business. We also open up an innovation hub in Cape Town, which is doing really well. We're the biggest innovation hub here, actually the only one to talk about, to be honest.
For travel, it was yet another accelerant to online.
And of course, here we are in 2025, and we know the impacts of tragedy again. Here in Asia, we did 3 years of COVID from 2020 through to most of 2023. And we know the accelerant effect it had on online shift. It caused a step change in people's use of the phone and a step change in people's use of online travel. So travel and tragedy have a constant linking. Because travel's so linked to the rest of the world, there are clear parts in the history of online travel where we can link tragedy to step changes in online travel.
Looking back, I often wonder, did we really go through all that? I remember the yearning to be with people, to travel. Stuck on a small island, I got really intimate with Singapore. Together with Wendy Koh, Wit's songwriter and singer in residence, we produced this song to share the hope that one day we'll get together soon.
We'll get together again someday soon. Walking together in sunlight or by the moon. We'll take a seat at the beach or the mall. 'Cause being together is the point of it all.
But let me tell you, by the time we were allowed to put on a hybrid event at Marina Bay Sands, Singapore, remember? The one with the unforgettable big faces on those giant screens? We were more than ready to say, hello, New World.
Oh yeah! Hello, new world. Hello to you. Hello, new world. With gratitude.
It was time to get back to doing what we love.
Doing what we love. Doing what we love. Doing what we love.
One home market or many? It's the question that every travel tech founder in Asia has had to answer. Big bets were placed on both sides, and neither path was easy. The companies with big domestic markets had an edge. Ctrip owned China, Make My Trip had India, Traveloka became a household name in Indonesia. WeGo found it hard going to build a pan-regional business across Southeast Asia at the start. Some have fallen by the wayside, among them Zuji, AsiaRooms.com. But the times, they are a-changing. Traveloka is now operating in 8 markets in Asia Pacific. Agoda, from its base in Thailand, has built a strong footprint in the region. Ctrip has evolved into the Trip.com group and has declared its goal to be the top global OTA in 5 years. That's by 2030. This bid to venture beyond home is a story told across Asia. Korea's OTAs, facing a saturated competitive market at home, are expanding along corridors popular with Korean travelers. So in the next chapter of online travel in Asia, can you only make it if you come from a big home market? Or have things changed enough for a multi-market model, where each market contributes big enough slices to make up a pie, big enough to make investors happy?
Now, since Chunar, I have invested in other companies, and I've been very involved with 2 companies in particular that are both in 10 markets each. One is in travel and tourism, and one is in digital media. Fast forward to the early days of Chunar to today, it seems that indeed one can be successful following a multi-market strategy. You can follow the big fish strategy, you focus on one incredible market. It could be India, it could be China, it could be the United States. Or do we follow the school of fish strategy instead, where we try to stitch together 5 or 6 markets? But those 5 or 6 markets added together become an amazingly large market.
So Crook is a specialist in a way that we are the leading players in experiences, especially in APAC. So instead of doing every single thing in a single market, we really create the network effect to bridge all the market and all the consumers to book all those amazing experiences in each of the destinations. So we really specialize in going down very deep in each of the subcategory under experiences. Well, it's not an easy journey, right? I mean, I wish I have a big home market. So my biggest home market is Asia. Just similar to Europe, right? I mean, from that perspective, right, our biggest home market is Asia. We're just proud to have Asia as the home market, and we did the hard work, we did the dirty work, right? Now we hope to bring that business model to the next scale in the global stage.
I really think that, for a platform, having a not necessarily a home market, but really a scale in specific category and sizable customer base for that specific category, that really matters. So people know what your brand stands for. What we've been doing as a company. Of course, now we are operating in eight markets in APAC. What we did was trying to replicate what we did in Indonesia to other markets with local flavor, and so on and so on. And so far, it's been quite working. Yeah, we are a big believer of that approach, localization.
Before I joined Trip, the way Ctrip or Trip.com expanded overseas is they basically just loaded Chinese staff or Chinese employees all over the world in the expansion, right? And I think they realized that this probably didn't work. So they went local. So after COVID itself or during COVID itself, we went much more local. In Singapore, we hired Singaporeans, Thai, and very local people. I think to me, the secret of the success is to get the best of both worlds. It is not about Chinese being the great or Americans being great. It's really making sure that whatever works best for you as an organization to be successful from the cultural perspective, from the work ethics perspective, from the approach and philosophy perspective, try to mix them together. Build a great concoction between these two. Get the best of both worlds. Now, it's easier said than done. If it's easily executable, then many global companies would have been very successful. But I think the way to do is be very embracing of all types of culture, all types of philosophies, and understand what are the pros and cons, and see how you take the pros of everyone and try to put them together and make it a success.
Whatever you believe and whatever your approach, what is clear is that Made in Asia brands such as Klook and Traveloka are finding their own footing, first at home and then the world. And it will be interesting to track the story of online travel as it unfolds the next 20 years. Flights was first, then hotels. But one part of the travel journey stayed messy. What to do when you get there. And another, where business travelers spend their days and dollars. In 1995, before Google, before Booking, Rod Cuthbert launched Viator. He believed tours and activities could be sold online. Most people thought he was insane. It took nearly 20 years for Viator to become attractive enough to be bought by TripAdvisor for $200 million in 2014.
So when Viator first launched as a site that would offer customers experiences in the destination they were traveling to, we were creating a marketplace, and we really had no idea how easy or hard that would be. And it turned out to be incredibly easy. And there were a couple of reasons for that. First of all, tour operators, experience operators, people who were in the sightseeing business were intensely frustrated by the fact that when they got bookings in advance, which they liked, they often didn't get paid for them. And when the tour company eventually sent the invoice to the travel agency in Liverpool, it wasn't really a priority for them to pay it because they're never going to send anybody there again. And that's not to say that all travel agents were like that. Of course they weren't. enough of them were like that it was very frustrating for experienced operators. They wanted those advanced bookings, they wanted the international customers, but it seemed the only way they could get them was from a hotel concierge the day before the people wanted to do the experience.
The sale of Viator lit up tours and activities. In 2014, two Hong Kong-based bankers and friends, Ethan Lin and Eric Ngok Fa, went on a trip to Nepal. They had a close encounter with death and wondered why it was so difficult for their generation of travelers to book things to do in destinations. They started Klook. In the last 10 years, Klook has grown impressively everywhere. It's proven the multi-market model can work in Asia, and in the next 20, it sees global as its new playground. But it's taken a few turning points to get here.
So the first turning point was going mobile. All right, the entire destination services of our accelerated growth was because of mobile. Because people are more spontaneous, right? Majority of the booking are happen within a destination, right? It's very different from flight and hotel that you need to book several weeks ahead before you even flying out to another city, right? The entire mobile is really give that spontaneous, instant, on-the-go experience to the consumers. The second turning point is the rise of social media and content. And now you actually get inspiration, right? 60-70% of the trip plannings or idea were inspired through the like of TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, right? Write book in China, right? I mean, for the millennial and Gen Zs. And the third one is the AI adoption, right? Which is largely changing how the localization, the service interaction with the consumer, the operational amount of the work in the travel space. On the other end, the consumer behavior, that is basically the new generation are travel very different from our parents. But in the last 10 years, because of all of this technology advancement, the growth of the FIT, the independent travelers, has accelerated, right? If you're asking a Gen Z or millennial, have they ever joined a tour group for 5 days, right? The very likely answer is, huh? What is that? Have not thought about it.
Today, the global tours and activities sector, valued at $279 billion in 2025 by Focusrite, has become part of the experience economy, the trend of people preferring to spend more money on experiences than material goods. Hello skydiving, bye-bye Gucci bags. Hello heart and soul, bye-bye bling bling. Then there's corporate travel, still stuck in the past and due for the biggest generational change in its history. New tech players, outsiders, OTAs are all moving into the space.
As we talk about technology advances, I think back to those days, 2008 when I joined BCD, 2010 when I first came to WIT, and we were talking about the speed of change of technology. But honestly, at the time, not changing as fast as maybe we thought it was. I remember, we would look country by country what we could offer to our customers, and these were typically the very large corporates. It was very nuanced by country, what type of payment options were available, what the GDS setup was by country, whether low-cost carriers were involved or not. So it was quite nuanced, and I don't know that over those few years, or maybe even over the last 10, it advanced as much as everything has in the last 5, I would say 2 to 3 to 5. So people having the good that came out of COVID ultimately was this kind of flexibility in work that has allowed people to now travel potentially for longer in destinations and enjoy it more for leisure purposes. And I know I'm a classic example of that. Definitely the budgets, corporate desire has changed, and then the consumer themselves when traveling.
Experiences, corporate, long treated as afterthoughts. Now, they are the next rocket boosters that will reshape travel in the third wave. If the first wave of online travel was defined by the internet, and the second by social and mobile, the third is defined by something bigger. A convergence of AI, quantum computing, cloud, social commerce, and a traveler who expects everything, everywhere, now. In the beginning, everyone picked a vertical: flights, hotels, tours. But now, it's all bleeding together. Everyone wants the connected trip. One app, one journey, even durians included.
The great majority of our business when I started in 2005 was air. Most of our revenue was from airlines. And that shifted over time to where now air is a smaller part of our revenue, a big part of our bookings. But the OTA space generally became more focused on hotels. Online travel is an ecosystem, a marketplace, and the successful companies are those that figure out what role they play in this marketplace. And at Expedia Group, we've been lucky enough to create a massive marketplace ourselves. And so we have scale of supply, we have scale of demand, and we bring those together with technology. And that's our business. And that is pretty representative of the online travel industry as a whole.
But size isn't everything. In markets like Korea, the second largest outbound market in Asia, local players are rising fast.
We always talking about global OTAs, that how can we compete and how what they are doing right now. So when I have started Thai Square, the number of outbound was around 10 million, if I remember right. And now it's over 30 million Korean outbound travelers.
In India, scale means something else. Ixigo cracked it, not by flying high, but by going deep into trains, buses, and real Indian problems.
So I think, there is one aspect of India which I think most companies do not appreciate much and have not sort of thought around, is that the winners in India need to do things in a very Indian manner, right? Which means you need to solve those problems not with the Western template on. And again, the example is like most OTAs were built with a flight plus hotel approach globally.
Right.
But at least in our case, the story is centered around rail and bus as opposed to, flight, because only 4% of Indians actually fly, right? So when you look at the challenges, there are unique opportunities in India which need to be solved with an Indian mindset.
Let's face it, local problems such as this, global OTAs are not going to bother with them. In this third wave too, generative AI will write most of the next chapter, no prompt intended. It is already changing the way travelers search, and social platforms have emerged as powerhouses of inspiration. So now you have OTAs who couldn't give two hoots about inspiration in the early days because you couldn't monetize dreaming, moving up the funnel to inspiration, while social platforms such as Instagram and TikTok make the migration to transactions.
Pre-online travel, you got content, advice, and booking from the same source. You went to an offline travel agency, they handed you a brochure, you asked them questions, they gave you the answers, and those answers led to you booking with that offline travel agent. The online world broke that model, changed that model, and it put content a little bit to the left, places where you could find advice, be they individual blogs or aggregator sites like a TripAdvisor, and you put bookings on the right at OTAs like us, my brothers and sisters in Amsterdam, and so forth. And in the middle, you stuck Google. And in travel, that required a whole different way of thinking about the rules of content. And as we're still trying to grasp it, 25 years later, we're still trying to understand the role that content can play in travel in a technological era. We're about to break the rules again with generative and agentic AI.
I will give one bold prediction. I think Google is going to be less and less relevant. in the sort of distribution space or the acquisition space. Because if you look at how social media, if you look at how even AI apps now, people can search for travel information and travel products on those apps itself, on those super apps. The kind of information, the kind of in-depth analysis they have provided to help travel decisions, to help look at where to go, right? What kind of travel products I should look or what kind of routes I should take is very, very extensive. So I think that those apps itself is going to continue to thrive itself. Those very intelligent apps.
You know, the big question that we're all asking ourselves is, will businesses that can attract capital for AI be able to enter the travel industry and disrupt it? Or will travel companies fundamentally become AI companies and disrupt themselves? My personal view at this point is that there are enough technical travel companies out there such that, yes, some of the ones who don't execute, don't innovate will fall away, and maybe even a couple of big ones. But there are enough really good travel companies out there to maintain and to disrupt themselves in AI.
There are those, though, who believe that AI should serve a higher purpose than be an advertising or content play.
And now we're at this incredible stage. But I can guarantee you that in the next 5-7 years, we're going to see a completely different world. And the enabler in that wave is actually data. So when you put those like Cambrian moments of technology, which changes a lot, it's like we had the internet, then we had social, then we had mobile, then we had cloud. And now we're in the latest stage, which is AI. And it is incredibly exciting because for the first time, and I think in my part of as a student of technology, the technology is not the problem anymore. And we need to do a better job of like thinking through the user experience and what we want to create for users and fuel it with data. Not in terms of selling them more, but in terms of making it really shine for them, not thinking about it, making that little stress and anxiety that we have as we travel taken away because the technology is there now. That you know that you'll be taken care of, that you don't have to stress out when your flight is delayed because it's already communicated to your loved ones at home that you'll be a little bit delayed. You're moved to the right thing. This can happen as we work across the industry, not just like airlines being airlines, transportation companies being transportation companies, and hotels being hotels. It's like throughout this journey, we can do so much better, and we have to. It's on us, and it's honestly not selling more ads.
I've always said that one of the most underlooked impacts that I think particularly for Asia is going to be the impact of AI on simultaneous translation. Because if you look at Southeast Asia in particular, the linguistic differences in Southeast Asia is far more fragmented than that in Europe. That is going to make travel within Southeast Asia become so amazing. But when that barrier breaks in a very, very physical and very tangible manner, I think that will prompt travel within Southeast Asia and Southeast Asian traveling outside of Southeast Asia. I think that impact will be even more than the advent of budget carriers, which had a huge impact.
However it unfolds, AI-powered search or social, one thing is constant. It's all about the traveler. Through all the twists and turns, the highs and lows and the upheavals, the traveler has always been the one driving change. From the first days of the internet to this third wave and the next to come. Travel brands that care for the customers will win, no matter the changes in tech. "20 years ago, I asked the question, what if the internet changed everything about travel in Asia? It did, and it will continue to do so. So what lies ahead? It's a tough question. but it's also the most exciting one. Think back 20 years. Did we ever imagine travel would be where it is now? I certainly didn't think that I'd be here telling this story or making this documentary. But imagination matters. As Carl Sagan once said, imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it, we go nowhere. Laura Holsworth, Managing Director, Asia Pacific Booking.com, imagines a more inclusive world.
And if we think about travel, whether it is language or different preferences of travel, that we provide inclusive travel. So nobody should feel limited and nobody should feel excluded. So whether that's me traveling as a female on my own, whether it's two men as a couple traveling, they should have the same experience. And we know that's not true today.
Jacinta Lim, CEO and co-founder Six Sophie, imagines a world of communities connected.
The other fairly interesting trend, I guess, which came out of social media, got a little bit amplified by COVID, which I think will be amplified even more in the coming years, is niche communities. So you'll have, like chili hates, right? Like people who love like chili, like coming together, maybe like traveling together to, the next like chili conference or something. But I think you see a lot more of those niche communities popping up, and a lot in Asia as well. And you start seeing a lot more travel being congregated around these niche communities.
Timothy Hughes of Agoda believes in tech, trust, and law.
Technology is a great creator of the need for legal protection. The obvious example is we didn't need road rules until we had cars because we didn't really have a problem. And now with technology, we're creating more and more needs for the law to catch up. Data privacy, for example, is going to be a huge part about the way in which we manage the future of the world. We need to get a balance right. There's a balance we have to get here. At some point, drones are going to be as common as a mobile phone. What happens then? What happens where everybody's got a camera flying above their head? How do we manage people's content and privacy in that time? And now we see with the age of AI, we've also got a question of authenticity. It's possible that you're not actually talking to me, you're talking to an AI version of me. And if there's one thing we know about consumers and travel, is the desire for authenticity, the desire for that experience to be real.
Ross Veach, CEO and co-founder Ouigo, imagines a world of high-speed travel that takes us to places in a jiffy.
So by 2045, there should be high-speed rail right around the Gulf, from Oman up to the UAE, across the UAE, connecting Bahrain and Kuwait and Qatar, across the desert to Riyadh. And the whole journey shouldn't take more than about an hour or 2 hours max. I think people underestimate how much it's going to revolutionize life here, just like taking the drudgery out of getting from city to city. So I see that as a key part of the travel in the future.
Then there are those who imagine agents taking over our world.
I think the OTA will have to morph and have to change pretty dramatically to respond to this need. So it's going to become entirely AI driven. My bet is there'll be actually a lot of new companies who don't exist today, but will take an AI first approach to the whole thing, a conversational kind of interface, everything else seamlessly locked up in the back. I do think most people will have agents, their own personal assistants or agents, either one for everything, an Uber agent, or different agents. So agentic flows is going to become really huge. I think the travel agent will be quite different. The OTA will be quite different from what we see today. And therefore, a lot of OTAs today who are not able to disrupt themselves and embrace the new will probably perish.
Then there's Stefan Ekberg of Travelstart, who calls it the Renaissance Age.
I think we've entered into an area of the new Renaissance. During the Renaissance, art and science, they went hand in hand. Mix of creativity and curiosity expanded the horizons of everything at the time. I believe that business today is already going in the same direction. Everything gets cheaper, more people can create, and I believe that AI is the ultimate sampler tool that is going to set up, a flurry of innovation, in business in general. But we're talking about online travel, hero travel. Tens of thousands and thousands of companies, they will ultimately destroy, the Booking.com of this world and Expedias, etc. because they won't be destroyed by one new player. They will be destroyed of thousands of new players that are more targeted, do things super cheap and super fast.
We also have the dreamers who believe that this period will lead to a true discovery of Asia and will herald the golden era for our region.
The stuff to be discovered yet in Asia in a physical sense, I think some places which are amazing to go to but were difficult to get to. I think it's going to become easier to get to a lot of these places, firstly.
Or even the snow in Japan, which international skiers and snowboarders now call Japao, which is actually described for the best powder snow in the world.
I think the real treasure of Asia is our old culture, our systems for living. I think those are going to be rediscovered.
I think that the Asia will have a more story to tell.
Whether it's yoga or meditation in India, whether it's Vipassana, which came actually from Myanmar and now is very big around the world, or it's healing techniques, which are going to come from. I think a lot of this is going to come to the front because as people discover that, hey, people several thousand years ago were onto something around well-being, and we need to discover that. And that's a full cycle. I think the whole abundance thing will lead to that because suddenly people will have, or not so suddenly, but soon people will have a lot of the material stuff, but start feeling vacuous in terms of, so what is the real meaning of life? So I know I'm sounding very philosophical, but I do think we'll go there.
What's happening now is the clear end game of Pax Americana and the beginning of the era of Fortress Americana. And the future is going to be what the world was like before Western colonialism, which only started about 200 years ago. But if you go beyond 200 years ago, it wasn't the Western world ruling the world. It wasn't China ruling the world. It was China having its own space in East Asia and its own vassal states around Southeast Asia. It was Europe. It was the Americas. And it was, maybe as Islamic world. You had different civilizations all competing and co-equal under the sun. Western values and civilization is no longer going to be the only model. But it does not mean, on the other hand, a zero-sum game that you're having an Asian century and that American or Western century is down. I think you're going to definitely see the rise of an Asian civilization, but it doesn't mean they're going to be dominant either. It's going to be co-equal civilizations.
What comes next? More creativity, more chaos, more wonder. We've seen the past 20 years. Imagine the next. So what is the real untold story of online travel in Asia? It's not just about the platforms, the bookings, the exits. It's about the people who built it, the outsiders, the misfits, the mavericks, the professionals, the curious, the hungry, the long tail and the independents. The ones who dared, who stumbled, and who kept going. And the very human stories they carry. Ethan Lin, CEO and co-founder of Klook, on the rookie mistake.
A typical question I have is that in the WIT mentoring session, someone will share a business idea, but now after doing it for 10 years, my first question will pop up and challenging the person is, do you think it's scalable? So one of the first activity we onboarded was para hawking. It's a paragliding experience in Nepal. The one who take you to paragliding also have a hawk. Like, if it's landing here, it goes out and coming back. So it's called para hawking, right? It's only 3 people can do it in the world in Nepal. So we onboarded. It looks amazing, right? But, with millions of views because it was such a social media buzz. And there's only 3 bookings ever. So what you think is a pain point, something of a personal interest, when you really put into a market, is it really scalable? Is it surprise scalable? Is the demand make sense for people who actually not just find it cool, but also want to enjoy it and book it?
Rob Rosenstein, chairman and co-founder of Agoda, talking about before COVID, there was SARS.
I remember I was flying into Hong Kong. Our original business, we were just working on pivoting to Agoda, and we were, working really hard. We were trying to keep this older business alive. And as I was flying into Hong Kong, people were coming into these giant hazmat suits, like space aliens, into the plane and spraying everybody. And during that week, everybody was dying. And I mean everybody. The doctors, who are heroes, the WHO doctors who were flying into Hong Kong, they were dying of SARS, like right away. So there was a sense of like, maybe this was the end of the world for like a few weeks. Maybe there was like a 4 or 5 week period where it was like, maybe we need to start spending some time with family, it was real scary. And my business, was basically bankrupt. We owed everybody money. All of the revenue evaporated. And in those days, we were buying a lot of our products from wholesalers. At some point at during the show, I realized we owe everybody money. And so did everybody owed everybody money. It was pretty bad. And so I guess one thing I'll share with you is I went and visited those people and told them that we couldn't pay them, but that we would. And I, had to make a payment schedule that was long and painful for everybody. But one thing I learned about that experience is I was brutally honest and I was committed to paying back the money. And we did. And that really helped us build, relationships over the years that I think ended up being very valuable.
Maurice Sim, co-founder, Circos Brand Karma, on the legal letter that arrived on Christmas Eve.
The single thing that caused the most amount of stress was in the early days, because we were pioneers in this field, just receiving, I remember receiving a letter from a very big review site that asked us to stop using their data on Christmas Eve, just when we had sold and signed our first client. And you can't imagine like how deflating that was. And it was like, it was a very large provider based in the States. And, they had a high power lawyer that basically sent us a pretty nasty letter, and on Christmas Eve, many years later, eventually worked it out to the point where we had to pay a licensing fee. Can you imagine, like you're sitting down about to have dinner, and I think my son at that point was probably like 3 or 4 years old, it's like daddy. And I'm like, wait a minute here. Something came in from, xxx.com or whatnot. And you're reading the letter and like, your just entire future just kind of flashes by and you think, oh my God, we're so effed. And, but that was really hard. But I would say it builds character. Like things don't always come, with a nice bow on top. And when you kind of you meet an obstacle, you kind of have to be creative and figure out your way around it.
Kei Shibata, co-founder, Travel.jp, on the moment that his hands were shaking.
We managed to IPO in the Japanese stock exchange in the year 2008. However, though, the founder, including myself, couldn't even sell the single share at the IPO. We are still owning less than 10% of a stock. 1 month later, the Lehman shock happened, financial crisis. So our stock price tanked. And then what happened was the boss of those two major investors who still own 90% of a company came to us and saying that they wanted to sell all of their shares. So what happened was we ended up is actually using most of our cash reserve that we actually earned and accumulated from our business operation over the course of previous 8 years to buy back the large portion of our shares from those investors. But it still wasn't enough, unfortunately. Soon after that, we decided to actually do a management buyout. I still remember, signing my personal guarantee for more than $20 million because it was necessary to actually complete the transaction. So my hands were shaking.
My hands would be shaking too. Above all, what struck me over the last 20 years has been the friendships that built businesses such as C-Trip, Make My Trip, Agoda, Klook, Wigo, Traveloka, and numerous others. But they would not have made it on their own without friendships across the industry. That was the first lesson Klook's co-founders, Ethan Lin and Eric Ngok learned when they won the WIT Startup Pitch in Japan in 2015.
What really that we take away from one of the suggestions from one of the George agent is travel is an ecosystem, right? There's so much things you need to do from different players in the market, and no one can do it all. So how to really maintain an open and transparent ecosystem and working with all the partners and for long-term sustainable development is a key to the success of the travel tech sector. Even including, the platforms such as WIT, really bringing the travel victim together to share ideas, share insights, and they can really flourish together from there.
And it is these next generation entrepreneurs that will take online travel in Asia to the next stage and define the next 20.
Let the show begin. Next generation for the win. We're going all in. All together now, let's begin.
What's interesting about the travel and tourism industry, and I think it is a secret, is it's astounding to me how many times outsiders come in and they create amazing products and services. And after 10 years, they're the ones on stage talking about and philosophizing to the next generation of entrepreneurs. But they themselves were outsiders, and now they're insiders. You can tell they're the next generation, obviously because they're younger. But when you talk to them, their eyes are shifty. They're doing this. They're looking here. They're looking over here. They want to see who they should meet. They have this pent up energy and anxiety that a well-established insider doesn't have. That they have their more, Teddy Roosevelt, cigarette. They're going, but these younger generation talents, they have this energy, and it's amazing to watch. And in fact, in some ways I envy it. But I did go through it myself, so I definitely didn't miss out on that.
So outsiders become insiders and new outsiders come in, and the cycle repeats. For years, Asia followed the West. Then it leapfrogged. Now, the world looks to Asia for ideas, for innovation, for inspiration. Here's how Timothy O'Neill Dunn, who has not missed a single WIT, tells the story.
When WIT started 20 years ago, the world was a very, very different place. The internet was still all a bubble, and investments went into cool ideas, basically on some pretty sketchy business plans. Expedia launched its venture into China with Elong. Spreadsheet jockeys talked about hockey sticks, and they were all the rage. Some analysts were even predicting the end of the boom-bust cycles and forever growth. China was still seen as this fabulous growth opportunity. Few thoughts about explosive growth were going into the Middle East as everything but a novelty. Every eye in APAC was on following America and bringing that model to Asia. Fast forward 20 years, and now it's almost completely the opposite. Dubai Airport is now the world's biggest in terms of passengers. See how things have changed? For 20 years, we didn't have a projection about what that was going to be. So WIT has always been there. It's been there for every stage of this transition. At first bringing in American and European talents to share with Asia, then taking it back, which I thought was just wonderful. Taking Asian talent and know-how to the Western world and now to Africa and the Middle East, all with a touch of Asian unique hospitality, endeavor, and sheer determination. It's been quite a journey to observe, and even better to participate in.
We began with David Bowie. Let's end with him. I don't know where I'm going, but I promise it won't be boring. The last 20, a ride. The next 20, a rocket. But here's a gentle reminder.
One of my favorite songs is Stay Gentle by Brandi Carlile. And I think that is a good motto for me in life. But for us in travel and industry, we should be curious, and we should want to understand each other. We should not be quick to judge or form opinions based on something we might hear or read online. Yeah, isn't that what our industry is all about? That has been our chapter before. I think that's the next chapter. So stay gentle.
Along with gentle, I think we have to be both reflective and inventive. More deliberate, more responsible about the decisions we make and the actions that we take to shape the industry we want and deserve. And of course, don't forget to have fun. Brace yourself for the next 20.
No stand still. We turn it up. We run on wheel. Together we